Thank you all so much for this extraordinary film. I was so completely captivated from start to finish, and I have some questions. I'm sure the audience does too. But I think to begin, I would love to know, Walter, how did the project, what was the inspiration to you to embark on a project of telling the story of Rubens Paiva's disappearance, and specifically with the focus on the perspective of his family and his wife as the starting point?
You know, at the very beginning, when I got to introduce the film, I didn't bring up the personal relationship with the story, because as I came back to Brazil in 1969, I had been living abroad for 5 years, and the country I came back to was very different from the country I had left, because it was now under military dictatorship, and I was personally pretty much at loss, really at loss, until I met this family of 5 kids, and it was Marcelo's family. I became really good friends with his sister, Nalu, and I got embraced by this family. I've been in that house, for almost 2 years, and on a constant level. We drifted to that house because in it you could hear the political discussions that didn't exist anymore, in the exterior of that place. You could hear the music that was forbidden, or the sounds of the Tropicalia that I discovered there. Your sister was so good in discovering music. It still is. And there were no barriers between, adults, adolescents, kids. And so this was completely different from my house. So I was very informed by that. So the moment where this was broken up was, for all of us who were in that house at some moment, kind of severed a line. It stipulated a before and an after, which obviously has to do with the moment where the state, when an authoritarian state invades the heart of a family. And that stayed with me for years and years and years, but I never thought of adapting it into a film. I didn't feel authorized to do so on a personal level. It's very difficult to somehow find the right way to relate that something that is so deeply ingrained in yourself. And then Marcelo wrote this miraculous book, this luminous book that really triggered everything, because I'm going to pass it to you, because I'm going to relay now the question to you, because it's so interesting to also to share why you wrote the book. I felt enamored by and really triggered the film. So, please.
Thank you. Good night. It's very interesting to see other people looking how our family was and how we were, and I didn't know that house was so happy and so musical. A lot of music and the people dancing, and we played football on the street. That is true. And dogs and children of the streets, and I only realized that we was like that because of Walter when he did the film, and for me I was surprised to know. Of course, I lived the difference between before and after, and the house became a restaurant after. And he said his brother said it's a not good restaurant. It's a Switzerland restaurant. And for me, it's very, for me, for my family, my sisters and everybody, it's very moving seeing us in the way that he saw us at the time. And this is important. Literature and film and theater are for that, for keep the memory alive at the time. And when I start writing or thinking of writing a book, my mother, which is kind of, for me, only a widow. And I'm the mother with problems as a mother, as all mothers. And sorry, Fernanda, I know that you're a mother. And then I realized that, wow, that woman did that, and those, and she went there, and she changed her life. She became a lawyer. She became working with indigenous people, and my father just died in '71, but she became a kind of leader, you know, with 5 kids, and he created 5 kids in good schools, in good universities, and all of them have master degrees, doctor, are teachers, writer, and I think she is the real Brazilian woman that we should talk about. That, but she was losing his memory, and I have a kid at the time, and when you have a kid, you realize what memory is when memory became a fact. For example, you said to the boy, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that." He forgets, and don't do that, he forgets. And suddenly he knows that he's not able to do that. He's forbidden to do that. Sometimes he do it because it's forbidden, but he learned this is memory, how memory is built. And I try to read a lot of books about memory. There is no books about memory. Few philosophers talk about that. And my mother losing his memory, and the country losing its memory, and the history is losing its memory, and so I think that memory is the subject that moves me to write the book, to talk about this fabulous woman and his fight, and to keep alive his history. Because I remember when I was in Germany in '94, the Schindler List was showing, and there was lines of young people, young German, 4 years after the reunification, to see the movie about a drama that they was part of. Not they, but their relatives, their grandmother, grandfathers, and the subject was a sort of kind of taboo to be talked to each other. And then I realized the importance of the movie. You know, Scorsese was talking to people nowadays what's happened years before, and that's why I wrote this book. You know, and I'm very glad to know that Walter is. This wonderful filmmaker bought the right, paid expensive money. I could, and Fernanda is in the project, a friend of mine for so many years, and Celton Mello and so many people. So it's like a family doing the film about my family.
Fernanda, I have to congratulate you on an extraordinary performance. I think it's difficult to imagine Eunice being embodied any other way than this incredibly sort of almost matter-of-fact way in which you embody her, and sort of the clarity that she possesses is so sort of miraculous. And I'm curious, Walter, Marcelo, at what point did you know that Fernanda was Eunice, and how did you, Fernanda, go about drawing out this incredible woman and making her your own?
You know, we did Foreign Land together, our formative movie. I think the movie where you discovered how you like to film, which director you are. And so I thought it was enough for me. It was fine. And I knew he was going to do this movie, but I never thought he would call me. I was a bit older than Eunice in the first part, and I was doing a lot of comedy later. And I thought I had seen too much. And he would never call me, but he doesn't watch television. So he still had that memory. And I became a writer. I was very happy doing theater, whatever. And then he called me one day and said, I'd like to talk to you, okay? And I thought he was going to ask me to do a script to write for him. And then he said, do you want to do Eunice? I said, are you sure? And then from now on, I said, I cannot betray Walter, because what we don't want to see is Walter disappointed with you. So I started really working hard for this. And even for the first lecture, I hired a coach. And I was like preparing myself, because I could feel that I could not make a mistake here, because, I mean, I would go back to comedy forever. And then we did the first lecture, and after that was like trying to approach to this woman that I would watch her interviews, and she had no cliché. I mean, she had no self-pity, but at the same time, she was not hard, she was not tough, she was not, she didn't have like anger. She was very clear, very full of dignity, very gentle, but very persuasive, and very clear, and never wanted, you write it in your book, to be a victim in open life. I mean, she could cry alone, but the dictatorship would never see her crying. So it was this amazing character, a chance to do something that was not what we normally do in fiction. There is like this, you do the angry scene, you do the laughing scene, but it all looks like the way we do in fiction. But Eunice, we couldn't do it. And then today I remember that the first approach we had of the characters was to remake the photographs that we see. And we spent like a week doing exactly the same photographs that we saw. And when you remake a photograph, it's not just posing. You have to have the feeling. I remember there was one with her skiing, and I remember like doing for hours, and then you would see the photograph, and it was not right, because it was like and this was the first approach. So the first approach he made us do was something really related to reality. And up to now, I will stop talking. Up to now, I feel like surprised when I watch the movie, because everybody is honest in this movie. And this is very surprising, because we see a lot of acting, good acting, but honesty is a bit rare. So I'm very thankful, of course, because now I have a drama career again. And for Eunice.
I'm so happy you brought up the photos, because one of my favorite aspects of the film is the attention that it pays to this family archive of these videos and these photos, and it embeds them within the narrative. We see Vera making the video, recording things. We see them posing for the photographs. And then, of course, in the credits, we see the original photographs. And meanwhile, we see all of them spread out and in the boxes and on the walls. And I'm curious, was that always your intention, to really dedicate so much of the narrative space to this incredible archive?
Well, I think that the first gesture as a documentarist is really to dive into what were the reflections of that era, and especially how did every single member of the family photograph one another, you know? And there was an array of photographs, and little by little we created this WhatsApp link where every member of the family would find new photos, and there was an extraordinary wealth of images that started to surface, and this ended up generating this idea of how to relay that filmically, and thus the Super 8. I personally used to do Super 8 at that time, to shoot Super 8, but I also think that it was a way to bring back I would say the immediacy of the moment, the vividness of the moment, and a certain, if we shoot the Super 8 of this moment, it will be already pregnant of of a sense of history, of a texture, of a specific time. So the idea to blend the narrative with something that had that degree of intimacy, was very much at the birth of the project. And as we developed it further and further, that became more and more important. And it blended really beautifully with the idea to shoot on film. On the 35mm adds grain and texture, projects you into an era without having to artificially create the elements to do so. So we wanted to actually to do that, but also to bring back a kind of something that Kieslowski did so wonderfully, which was the idea that every single take had something sacred about it. It would be just that take. So we, in opting for the 35mm, that also created a praxis during the shoot, is that we did a very limited amount of takes. Yeah. Very limited. It is this is Afonso did miracles with very little, in fact, because we shot a very precise amount of material, and again, every those elements that you're referring to have to do with memory. Memory was the subject of the film. The personal memory of that family is blended with the desire of a country to find again its own memory and its own identity after 21 years of military dictatorship. So this felt like an organic choice,
I think that a picture is, there is a rule in our life to keep the memory alive. Sometimes we forget things, but when you look at the pictures, oh, this has happened, And the things that we most remember from our past is the things that you have pictures about that, And after my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I was responsible for her, and they took all of her archives, and there were boxes and boxes and boxes of pictures. And I organized that, I digitalized that, and I was surprised how many material, the material was beautiful, as Walter said. It was very difficult to choose which picture we want to use. And I love that because since the film is about memory, pictures are memory, you know? And that's why they are there, you know? I think that the people with Alzheimer's need to organize that, to think when and how it's happened.
I think one of the most rare strengths of the film is the way that it situates its story in a context of historical specificity, this very particular moment of dire historical stakes and circumstances, and where historical memory is, at stake in coming to terms with Brazil's history, but also marrying that to the history of a family and the experience, the lived experience of a family and the memories that were built from that. And I want to ask all three of you, really, in approaching this project, how you managed to tell this story in a way. It's a story that involves, because of imposed historical circumstances, it involves tremendous amounts of fear and anger and grief and difficult emotions. But the overwhelming impression of the film that I came away with was how much this family loved one another, and how much this mother loved her children and her husband, and how much love, even in his absence, Rubens' love for his children and wife were felt. And how do you tell such a horrific, difficult story while always holding on to this extraordinary force, which is this family's love and dedication?
But today we're talking about it because why to make a movie about the dictatorship in Brazil? Means like doing a movie about the Nazi period to say it was really bad. But then why doing it now? And we're talking about, we just passed a pandemic. We are facing like a time of global warming. We really live nowadays in a historical, with capital H moment where our personal lives are like affected by big things that we cannot control. So this family was a victim of the Cold War, something that started in the first world countries and in South America took the shape of dictatorships. And this woman and this family, they were victims of this. But nowadays we are living this, or because of the extreme right that's like coming back, or because of global warming, or because of the Milton hurricane. And then I think this film is so emotional to us because it reminds us of this little cell of affection that is a family, that perhaps will makes us face it and pass it and make this life make sense. So that's what I think makes sense now about this movie is the family. I mean, this, and also it's not a historical movie about the heroes who fought a war or who were like doing a revolution. It's a movie about this woman. So it's a very feminist movie without the protocol of feminism. This is also perhaps now to see history through the eyes of a mother, of a woman. It's a way of surviving such a horror, you see.
You know, we mentioned the first part of the film, and for me, the first part of the film carries the promise of the country that could have been, you know? And it's also a film about what that family could have been. And what you see at the beginning is a form of expression, affection, of joy that somehow has been robbed. And from that moment on, the film becomes a film about an absence. And that absence is only filled by the way this woman reacts, Eunice reacts, by truly reinventing herself. You know, this was a very patriarchal society, even in the most progressive, you know, families. It was still very patriarchal. So it was a mother of 5 that suddenly has to face what she has to face, and the way she deals with that it has to do with a reinvention that is fully based on a form of first resisting in a way that you wouldn't expect. Smile, which she really did whenever you know the family was to be photographed, as you could see in the photo from the Manchete magazine at the very end, the real photo that appears, and finding truly subversive forms of resistance that at the same time defied what you would normally expect from you know, from the act of resistance. So I think that there's something in this woman that is extraordinary and that guided us in an exercise of restraint, you know, and somehow of subtraction in the film as a whole. That is that the acting had to. We tried to control it as much as we could. We tried to escape from melodrama as much as we could. Fernanda says that in tragedy one doesn't.
No, this was my mother once. She told me, you know, Nanda, when you do tragedy, if you do Acuba, you cannot start crying the first bad news. Because, I mean, everybody would die, your son, your family will become a slave. If you start crying the first scene, at the end you'll be like a cockroach. So, tragedy, and I was thinking about it with Eunice. I said, tragedy is something that implodes within you, and something that you endure it. It's not something that you show everybody. How tough this is. No, you just stand and go on and move on. And this is very powerful about Eunice. And even the silence. I mean, I was triggered about the fact that she remained in silence. And then I thought, can you imagine to tell each child from 7 years old to 18 years old, your father was killed by the state. But how? Did he do anything? No, he didn't do anything, but he was tortured. It's impossible. She would those children would be marked by this forever. So silence was a way to liberate their children from that. It's terrible at the same time, but it was a kind of freedom to them, and I think she has chosen it. So it's it's an Acuba. It's really a Greek tragedy. It has this quality, and it's a different kind of acting of everything, even our clothings. You know, we did remember this, we did a test, and the hairdresser, he did like 70 hair. And Claudia chose like some things from the 70s. And then the hairdresser, next day he was fired. And he never came back. And Claudia, all those fancy, you see, the 70 clothes, they disappeared, and she would bring me like this skirt, and I would tell Claudia, aren't you ashamed? Look at it, it was like a rug, it was awful. The blouses were like old, they smell, they sweat. And one day I was like wearing a pant, and I look in the back, and it was the pant of an extra in this old production house in Brazil, LC Barreto. So someone used it like in a film 10 years ago, and I said, aren't you ashamed, Claudia? So that was how we did it. Everything was slow, real, and like Eunice. Well.
There's one thing. I would say that this exercise in economy somehow also affected the writing itself and the screenplay itself. So just one example. There's a moment where the moment where she goes, counts the money, and dismisses the woman who is the helper in the house. She goes to her room. You see her entering, but you actually don't see the act of, you know, of letting that person go. I think normally, if you were on television, you will only see that the act of, you know, firing the person. That this is exactly the opposite. That's the only thing that we don't show. So it
torture. I mean.
Yeah.
Every film would show, and no.
But that also has to do a lot with the fact that we're embracing Eunice's point of view. And so it's about, it's there, but it's there in the sound. It's there in, you know, circling, in you know, in, and the sound was, the sound design was so important here. For instance, it's so luminous in terms of sound at the beginning, but when the military police invade the house, what you have is again a subtraction of sound. It ceases. You cease to hear the sound, the exterior sounds, and there is no more music. That house that was so lively, you know, musically, suddenly there's nothing. There's very little anymore. There's just one sound here, another sound there. So the construction of the film and this idea of drying it up in that has a lot to do with the character itself. You know, it's very organic to the character of Eunice, as she truly was. And it's the first time that something happened like that to, you know, to a film I've done. This is maybe one of the excuses for having spent 7 years to get to the end of the screenplay.
I'm very glad you're here because I talked too much and then I left them talking. And there is something that I remember when my mother died in December 13th, 2018. And was the day of the anniversary of the 50 years of the Ato Institucional número 5, AI-5, which is the coup d'etat of the coup d'etat, when the dictatorship became stronger. And everybody was in jail, and
the civil rights were suspended.
Exactly. And my mother died the same day. And there was in the news television news at night, and I turn on the TV to check how they are going to deal with that. And then they spend 30 seconds to say that today was 50 years of the ato institucional número 5, and died Eunice Paiva. And they spent 18 minutes talking about my mother, taking materials from the archives and pictures and interviews. And in the end, the host of the newspaper of the news from Globo says, died a very gentle, elegant, and woman who treat us always in a good humor and with respect the press, and taught us a lot of about life. I was amazed because, and I remember that a lot of journalists, because I'm also work as a journalist, I used to, and they say, oh, I love to interview your mother, she's so smart, she's so brilliant. So a lot of things about her I didn't know, and I knew through my friends, journalists, and she was a kind of favorite source for them, and there are about 10 journalists that all the time call my mother to talk about something, and was a brilliant woman, and that's why I wrote a book.
I'm going to add just one thing. When your mother became a lawyer specialized in tracing reserva indígena, how do you say that in English? My English is failing me. The indigenous reservations.
Original people is the woke term, isn't it?
A lot of people used to, call her to the, and Marcelo would respond the telephone, and she said, "Mother, it's this Sting wants to talk to you again," So this is the kind of people who were calling, Sting was calling people.
Sting had a foundation with Kaiowás, and the grand leader of Kaiowá, Kayapó, sorry. What's the name of the grand leader? Raoni. Sting asked Raoni, "Oh, Raoni, I'm your fan." I don't know if Sting talk like that, but I want to help you to defend your land. What do you need? And Raoni said, "Boxes of rifles." And he decided to consult lawyers about that. And my mother was his lawyer, and when his lawyer, Rita Lee's lawyer, Gilberto Gil's lawyer, all of those who had foundations trying to help the original people, lands. Talk to my mother, all the time the telephone. "Oh, mother, come on, Sting again. Oh, shit. Go fast. I have to call my girlfriend, And it's just very fun, but it's a real story,
And I have a question. Because your father, for instance, very progressive, adorable, but he didn't like the idea of Eunice working. Oh. That's very
60s.
Madman.
Yeah. Bats.
True,
Yeah.
There are a couple from the 50s.
Don Draper, yeah.
And then...
Yeah, exactly the same.
I mean...
Even the clothes were the same, and the cards, and he's smoking with kids, And the
good old time.
Good old time, yeah, good old time. We were our bunch of brothers working.
And then, do you think she would become a lawyer?
Good question. I know that at the end of, before she was a widow, before everything, and she told me after, years after, she was thinking of getting a divorce because she asked him, I want to work. And he said, oh, you want to open a clothes store, a boutique in Ipanema? And she was furious because she was an intellectual. She read everything of Dostoevsky. And I don't know, I'm not sure about that, but that there is everybody here saw Mad Men? Okay. Remember when there was a scene when Don Draper arrives at home and asks, Betty, tonight you must be like Betty, you know? You must dress up because I have a very important dinner in Manhattan. And okay, all right. She was a model. She was an ex-model, and she looks like the hair, and so she was like a trophy girl, trophy woman. You know? And my mother was like that. You know, she was like at 5, 6 p.m. She was start preparing herself for the man with a drink, with a whiskey. And okay, let's go to the house of baby. Okay, let's go to the movie. Okay, let's go to the party, you know. And she went. And
Yeah, this I like in the movie. The beginning, I'm like taking care of the coffee, putting the children to bed, and suddenly she's forced to become herself, and this is so interesting.
And this is a paradox, very interesting paradox, because of being a widow, she became free. She's very crazy, and not only her, but us, because Walter knows that. But I have friends. We have friends that follow the career of their fathers, you know, and the mothers.
I know.
I know. Yeah.
Some of them. They are called Nepo babies nowadays.
I was talking about engineers, bankers.
Okay. I tried, but they forced me to go to theater. I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
But they said, no.
Yes. You want to be a lawyer, yes. And for us, even for the children, was a kind of liberation being, you know, without such a big influence of your father. I had friends that couldn't be so free as I was, you know. And without money, it was interesting because I have to live without money, living with friends, you know. And it's a paradox, you know. Sometimes it's good to don't have a father, you know, or a husband. Sorry, but it's true. You know?
So with this phrase,
we are going far in this. We are going far in this discussion. I think we should stop now because it became a kind of fraud, fraud sessions, you know.
It's been a privilege, speaking only for myself, but I have to thank you all so much for this.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you.